And welcome back to the class, everyone. Today we are going to be ranking and talking about all of the GAC Omicrons. One of the reasons why this video is happening right now, and we've done one like this a long time ago, is because Savage here actually just got an Omicron, and we talked about its general uses and whatnot. And one of the things that kind of kept reappearing is not whether this is a good Omicron, we'll talk about his a little as well later, but whether this is better than your other options. Because at the end of the day, when you're building a roster, when you're applying Omicrons or Zetas or High Relics or whatever it is, it's not always a question of is this good, it's a question of is this better than your other option, because we're all going to get these mats at some point or another. We're all going to have options to apply them to, and we have to kind of figure out what's best for our roster. So this whole list right here, and these are ranked one by one, by the way, they're currently in categories just for the sake of organization, but the first one in the first slot is the best, and the last one in the last slot is the worst, and that'll come up a few times. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into this, and we are going to start with the worst ones, or really what I would like to call niche. At the end of the day, the stats that they're giving, for the most part, there's always some scenario that you can get them to work, and I know fanboys of each one of these Omicrons, so you know there's always going to be one or two people out there that are going to be upset by our opinions on this. So the first one up, or the last one up we have, is Director Krennic. This Omicron is just so sad, and the reason why it's sad or bad or the worst or whatever you want to call it is because it once again ties Krennic and Death Trooper together, and this is just something that doesn't work in the current game. Right now, Death Trooper has a really good home with Iden. In fact, he's had that really good home with Iden ever since this Omicron has existed. She outdates it, so this has never really been that great of an idea. Unless you are an Empire enthusiast, and in 3v3 and 5v5 you want to make a bazillion teams, that is your prerogative. I'm sure you can get some use out of it there. But as it stands, even in 3v3, there are 7 better Empire leaders than Director Krennic. It's not close, it's not good. So yeah, for the most part, unless again you're an Empire enthusiast and you're trying to make a lot of teams, not your guy. Next up, for second worst or second relevant, Talons actually isn't that bad, but it falls into a very similar category of Krennic's, where Krennic can't really be given Death Trooper. It's much better utilized elsewhere. Talon, in a very similar fashion, cannot be given Scion and Trey, or rather, Talon can't be given to Scion and Trey given the current meta. Talon is much more useful on a Darth Malgus team. It almost seems like she's custom built for it. And if you go into the details of her Omicron, it revolves a lot around Isolate and Pain. These aren't things that Malgus does, so this ends up just coming up as a net negative. You might be able to do something in 3v3, but even then, like, do you want to break up the Sith trio? I mean, you can, and you can use the Omicron in that way, but why would you spend an Omicron when you could just run that team as it is? So that's kind of why this falls at where it's at. Next up is going to be Rose. Rose is actually kind of useful. The big issue with her, and she kind of falls into a similar category as Krennic, where if you only have a bunch of resistance, let's say Rey was your first GL, and a Finn team is actually really crucial to your GAC lineup, it's one of your 10 best teams, this can have kind of a home. It fits very well within the resistance mold. It likes to do a lot of the things they like to do. They gain offense for every exposed, and they gain 5% turn meter whenever a resistant ally scores a critical hit. Critical hits and exposes turn meter, that's all very much resistance. It's just a really low bar, and eventually when you start filling out your teams and you get to a larger GAC board, this really drops in value. And like I said, it is in the worst or the niche category for a reason. These are 3, again, unless you're an enthusiast of that faction and you're wanting to make 1,000, that's where they're going to go. Also, something else I should have mentioned in the very beginning, Starkiller and Malgus are obviously the best. They are one step above pretty much everyone else in every way, but that's only really for their unique on Starkiller and lead on Malgus. The reason why they're in the situational bunch, and I guess we'll get to them now, is because this is actually talking about their second and third Omicrons. It's not talking about their first one. That is obviously better. That doesn't even make the list because the advantage is just so unfair. That being said, Let's go ahead and get into these guys now. So the other three were, the worst or the niche ones. This is when things start to get situational. Tusken Raider has some situations where he can be very good. The real reason why he's this low is because he's only usable in 3v3, and I don't even think that CG needed to do this. Why couldn't you just make it for 5v5 and then they can undersize something? Like, that's significantly better. For the most part, though, this Omicron is, figured out. If you take in something that can ignore taunt, or that can get rid of revives, was a really powerful AoE. All those things really kind of take it down within a combination of them. So it's not the strongest team in the world, and they don't have like any wild stacking offense or anything like that that can make them kill something as long as the AI is dumb. They're just kind of there. Again, they're not bad, they're not quite as niche, but it's very situational as to when you're going to get a lot of value out of this, especially because Lord Vader is typically one of the last Galactic Legends that people go for whatever reason, and you're already going to have a pretty full roster by the time you get there for 3v3, so he comes in at 5th. Next is going to be Malgus and Starkiller, and we could probably group these two together. I know that they said they're in order, but for the most part, these other Omicrons that they have are just very situational. They're not necessarily bad, but unless you're fighting a really tanky JTR and array team, this Tiger Throw or Boundless Force Throw doesn't really get you anywhere with Starkiller. Unless the enemy team has a lot of buffs, Repulse also doesn't really do a whole lot for you. They're both good in situations, but not really necessary to get the character to be super broken, as is, his unique, or say Malgus's leadership. Those are both very good. Malgus, like, we can't make too many comments, especially on the special. The special seems decent, but right now the main Datacron that exists doesn't even let him use it. So they're gonna both fall in that area right now. And then next up is going to be Princess Leia and Akbar. They're pretty similar to, like I said in the other ones, where it's situational. I don't really like these for the vast majority of endgame rosters. The biggest advantage that you can have with at least Akbar's at a minimum is that you can start to mix up your rebels. You can put like CLS and Ubaka here, and then maybe you can take a lot of the other droids, or Han and Chewie rather, and put them with Dash. So there are ways that this can be useful, but I mean, in the lower game too, I just can't. My big issue is I can't fathom gearing the characters this kind of guy needs, and at that point, it's just a question of swapping up your board, which again is useful, but it comes down to being situational. It's not. I don't think it's going to make or break a lot of GACs, but he is at the very top of the situational for a reason, because he is pretty decent. That being said, let's go ahead and move on to the impactful. These are start to become I think the more important Omicrons. Probably not super game breaking, but they're going to allow your teams to ensure victories in fights where it might have been a little sketchy before. And we'll start off with Admiral Raddus. Admiral Raddus is pretty good. He is going to allow you to go a lot sooner, because your entire, that's the wrong ability, your entire team is going to start with the Spark of the Rebellion, which does add speed. They're going to have a lot extra survivability. It doesn't change the majority of matchups. It changes some, like Zam is still easily outspeeding this with bounty hunters, and Bad Batch is able to go second and still win very easily. So it's not a huge outlier, but it's something that's going to help the team do what it did before to a greater extent. Not going to change a lot of counters, but it's going to get pushed farther into that field of being more consistent at what it does, like beating Iden and things of the sort. Next up is actually going to be Chirpa. Chirpa is pretty much identical to the situation with Adrad. The big difference is Chirpa is way more accessible. He's not going to be that great for the vast majority of players that are in the end game, because most people don't have relic Ewoks to go along with the Omicron, so it doesn't end up being that impactful. It's probably, if we're being real, I'm much more likely to actually put one of the situational Omicrons on before I end this one, just because I'm not willing to relic up the entire Ewok faction until some of them start becoming requirements for Galactic Legends, which is probably going to happen. So it's there. It helps Ewoks do what they do a lot better than they could before. They go super quick in the very beginning. They can link turn meter. I've seen some people do some pretty crazy things with them high up, but it's not really that well known. Next up is going to be Asajj. Asajj, again, along the same line. She's going to help her faction do the same things they did before, just to a much better extent. With her Rampage Omicron, she is going to be able to have more health, potency, tenacity for the whole team, and then she's also going to be able to spam her AoE, which is going to, therefore, lower max health and defense. This is really, really good. The big issue, and I talked about this in my own review of this video, is that it doesn't really change what the Night Sisters can beat. If you come in there with a team that's going to go entirely first and just wipe them out, she doesn't get to do any of that. There's no extra cleanse here. There's no type of savior mechanic to kind of save them when things start to go south. The counters like Imperial Troopers or Bounty Hunters or anything else that's kind of on that level of beating them, it's going to continue beating them. They're going to do, again, to a greater extent what they've already done. They'll still beat Grievous really well. They'll be able to beat the other teams around that level. I think Swordy's a really great one they'll be able to tackle. And that being said, the team Night Sisters already had a pretty good chance at doing that before, so she only increases those odds. Next up is going to be Savage. Again, I'm not going to go too much in detail because we just did a video on this, but dude becomes a super tank. He's going to be constantly taunting. He has a ton of defense. The only thing that I don't love about Savage is he's still open to quite a few weaknesses. A lot of his thing is defense. You get him with 2 stacks of armor shred, and the whole thing is pretty much just right out the window. He's also not immune to any max health damage, and there's now a lot of that. And he can shake a lot of it off by dispelling, like explosives and dots. But there's still other ways that can really nip him in the butt. So, Savage is, again, good. He's impactful for your Sith teams, whether it be Traya or your C team. I don't love him on a Sith Empire team. They really kind of like their debuffs, and if he's constantly ripping them away, and also Malgus and Malak already taunt really well. But that being said, he helps the other 2 teams really do what they want to do. And now Dash. And Dash, you can really make a good argument, and this probably only happened because I had to sort them out by 5s, but Dash is really going to fit into the next category. He is impactful. It's a much smaller impact or a much smaller transformative change because you really need to have a very specific comp for the Omicron for Dash to work. He pretty much makes sure everyone is prepared all the time, which gives a huge plus to Vandor, because essentially Vandor's just going to revive everyone all the time unless he's, dead, or if they have a permakill or something of the sort. And that's going to rapidly change that team. The reason why he's this low on the list is pretty much just because he has to have that exact comp. The next 5 that we're going to look at are just what are going to do pretty much the similar thing, but they're going to be way more versatile in the way they do it. And now we're going to hit the top 5. Before I do that, let me do mention, and I forgot to do this at the beginning as well, Chrysanthemum is not on the list, and neither is Ben Swolo, because we really haven't seen the full potential of what their Omicrons are going to do. Yes, they do have GAC Omicrons, but without a full Hutt Cartel faction under Jabba, I have no idea if Black Chrysanthemum's Omicron is going to be at all impactful. And Ben Swolo, we don't even have him in game. Or we don't have anyone who has them unlocked in game, so it's really hard to comment on those. And if I were to put them in here just based off of guesses, Chrysanthemum would be here. Like, we just don't know, so it's not really fair to them, so they are not on the list. And now we're going to move into the top 5. This is the transformative. So again, a quick overview of everything. The first ones we looked at, they were niche. Very few situations are these going to be good. Situational, you're going to be able to find ways that these are going to be helpful, but they're really not going to wildly transform your roster. These are going to really help your counters work to a higher extent and maybe even unlock some more on a very nuanced level. Transformative. This is going to take the team that you had before, and all of a sudden, you are going to get to beat a list, whether it be small or long, of new counters. It's going to rapidly change the team. First Order TIE Pilot, he does come in last just because, similar to Asajj Ventress, the team is still limited by its nature. First Order still have kind of a list of things they do, and if the enemy team they are going against has a way around it, they still can't do a lot, but it's still like the laundry list that is this Omicron is ridiculous. 100 speed when you have advantage, 100% tenacity before they gain advantage, 20% they recover 20% health and protection, foresight, they gain a bunch of max health. It's really helpful for Crew and Fox. Like, it just does so many things that it doesn't change every matchup. Like, Bad Batch still really have their number, but they're able to, when you put more investment in them, beat higher things up like Starkiller in 3v3. So again, he's not the best Omicron per se, but he's going to be able to let Hux and Crew, or Phasma even, do things that they couldn't normally do, or at least call out a higher counter. Next up is going to be Iden. Gosh, I love Iden. This leadership ability is bonkers, and I really love this for what it lets you do at really low gear levels. We currently have pretty much a gear 12 team of Iden troopers, and they consistently beat relic Mon Mothma teams. I think I've lost like once, and we've used it every match in 5v5 since she's been in game. Very, very good Omicron. If you don't have this, if you just get rid of this Omicron, I lose all of those matches. It also helps you beat other teams as well, like CLS, once you actually do get them geared and going. So very, very good, very, very transformative, as the category implies. Next up is Zam. Zam is really good. Honestly, in some ways, Zam might be first on this list. Bounty Hunters are one of the factions where it is most crucial to go first. They need to go before the end of the team. They need to get their contract. They need to get their buffs going. They need to get their taunt up. They need to get their disintegrate. They have this huge list of things they want to do, and by letting them go first, they get to do all of it. And this is really a big deal in the current game, where the normal speed or normal high speed for a team is like 400. Without this, Bounty Hunter's list of counters, the amount of things they can beat, is on the much lower end. Yes, there are still some things they can do, but this just makes it that much better, because depending on how everyone's modded, you can get up to like 80 extra speed on everyone, which, similar to First Order TIE Pilot, it's kind of bonkers. Very, very good Omicron in general. Next up is Wampa. Wampa, he's gonna be a little bit, situational is the right word, but it's gonna depend on your roster whether or not he is going to be a good option. If you're a early, mid, or even like on the early side of late game, he is just so good. Number one, you have a character that is an entire team. That's huge. He's also better banners. But if you're in the mid game, he's actually beating teams that are relevant. Where I'm at right now, I'm at the bottom half of Kyber 1, and I'm still occasionally getting to use him to beat Iden and things like that. Maybe teams that I could beat with another team. But when you get a little bit lower, maybe into like Kyber 5 or even into Erodium, he's beating teams that you just might not even have a counter to, like Grievous. I know that Grievous is kind of a joke on defense when you get to the very end game, but in the mid game, he's a major pain in the butt. And Wampa just kind of comes up and he's an entire solution to that one character. Just amazing. And he beats a wide variety of things. He doesn't need help from anyone else. You have to have good mods on him, of course. You have to have at a decent relic level, because the way his Omicron works is it stacks a bunch of his stats, and your base stats are already really low. Doesn't get a lot out of it, but still very, very good. And last but not least, very much not least, is going to be Qui-Gon Jinn. This is the only Omicron that we have to date that says it has to, in GAC, that says it has to turn off against the Galactic Legends, because if it didn't, it would beat them. And this is really, really cool, because you get out of this team what you put into it, which makes it good at pretty much every stinking level. It's really, really hard to get around in 3v3, but even in 5v5, if you just want to say throw Jedi Anakin, throw it on defense, call it Bad Batch, call it a day, that's fine, you can do that. If you want to put more into it, if you want to put Cam in there, and you want to put Mace in there, make things a little bit more complicated, maybe beat some other teams on offense for not as great banners, you can do that. If you want to give it a 150 speed on all the characters with Ahsoka and GK, and Bad Batch suddenly doesn't beat it anymore, and they have to start using a really, really strong counter to take it on defense, or maybe you want to take it on offense and two-shot Malgus. We've done that 3 times this last season. He just has so much versatility, I think, for roster, that anywhere from the beginning game to the end game he's useful. He's not capped to 5v5 or 3v3, whether in words or just in practicality. Just very, very good, very accessible. The characters that he needs on the team aren't even that hard to get, and he's one of the very few ways that Cam at 4 stars can actually be very useful, because the way that this works is it changes our speed into offense. So if you have a gear 11 Cam that's like 4 stars, his offense is now through the roof because it's based on speed and not anything else. His modifiers are still really stinking high, and he also can't die, so it just pairs really well. And even if you don't have Cam, Jedi Anakin is a very accessible character. I think he's now even in the starting lineup. So those are my picks for Omicron. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know what we got wrong. Again, remembering, I hope I don't get a comment about this. Starkiller and Malgus are above all these in the unique in their lead. They're at where they're at because of the other Omicrons they have. And then Chrysanthemum and Ben Solo, they just didn't make the cut. Not because they're bad, but because we don't have enough information. With that being said, remember to like and subscribe, and as always, stay awesome.